A warm welcome. You're tuned in to Eye on Africa. I'm Rochelle Ferguson-Biahe. These are the top stories. An Ebola outbreak in DR Congo is not yet a global health emergency. The words of the World Health Organization this Friday, as the UN body says it believes the virus can be brought under control. The US ambassador to Cameroon accuses government troops of abuse and targeted killings against militants in the country's English-speaking regions. Also coming up in the programme, we explore the role of Cape Verde's oldest city in the transatlantic slave trade. We bring you a report from our team on the ground. But first, the World Health Organization has said it believes an outbreak of the Ebola virus in DR Congo can be brought under control. At an emergency summit this Friday, experts said that the outbreak doesn't yet warrant being declared a global health emergency. Dozens of people are thought to have been infected, while authorities say they're investigating 25 deaths. Rudiba Abbas has this report.
The World Health Organization is in a race against time to contain another Ebola outbreak and to prove it has learnt from its past mistakes, as dozens of cases were identified in the Democratic Republic of Congo. There were fears of the disease spreading after a patient was identified in Mbandaka, a city with a population of 1.9 million. On Friday, the organization held crisis talks. Officials said they were confident that the situation could be brought under control and that it did not pose an international risk.
Really, from the first days of the confirmation on May the 8th, we've put on alert the 9 surrounding countries. They've been ranked in order of priority. Of course, the highest priority are the immediate neighbors, Congo-Brazzaville, Central African Republic, and Angola.
Between 2013 and 2015, the World Health Organization was widely criticized for its response to the deadly disease. It took 8 months to declare the outbreak an emergency. By then, 1,000 people had already been killed. Founded in 1948 as the public health arm of the United Nations, the WHO is responsible for providing leadership, recommendations and technical support on global health issues. The last Ebola epidemic was the world's deadliest. It started in Guinea and spread to countries across West Africa, including Liberia and Sierra Leone. Lasting more than 2 years, a total of around 29,000 cases were recorded, with more than 11,300 killed. The WHO wasn't the only actor to take heat for its response. A report by Doctors Without Borders pointed the finger at West African governments, saying Guinea and Sierra Leone refused to cooperate with the NGO, thereby obstructing an early response.
Well, Sierra Leone's army has meanwhile been holding a 2-day simulation exercise to test its readiness in case of another Ebola outbreak. As part of the exercise, the army set up an isolation unit and treatment facility in the capital where nurses simulated treating Ebola patients. Authorities have stressed the exercise isn't related to the Ebola outbreak in DRC. Almost 4,000 people died in Sierra Leone between 2014 and 2016 during an Ebola outbreak there. In other news, the US ambassador to Cameroon has accused government troops of abuse and targeted killings against militants wanting independence in the country's English-speaking regions. Ambassador Peter Barlien comments were issued via a statement after a meeting with President Paul Biya. Unrest in Cameroon's English-speaking regions began in 2016 when activists intensified a campaign for greater autonomy. Indira Oyuk reports from Yaoundé.
As the Anglophone crisis in Cameroon continues to deepen, international communities are beginning to take a stance on the issue, as some have even condemned the violence. While visiting the head of state, President Paul Biya Thursday, the U.S. ambassador to Cameroon, Peter Henry Ballerin, had the opportunity to address some keynote issues, including the Anglophone crisis. He noted that both the government of Cameroon and the separatists are adding more fuel to the fire. He accused the government of Cameroon of carrying out or triggering killings, carrying out a detention without notifying neither the legal parties nor the families or the Red Cross. And he also accused them of burning and looting villages in the northwest and southwest regions of Cameroon. Addressing the separatists, the U.S. diplomat noted that the separatists can be found guilty of burning down schools, of kidnapping government officials, and also of threatening people. He urged the head of state of Cameroon, President Paul Biya, to address the issue once and for all, calling both parties to dialogue. He said if both parties are not willing to listen to each other, then the crisis will know no end. He also had the opportunity to touch on other issues, including the upcoming presidential elections, HIV and AIDS in Cameroon, and also the security situation in the country.
Well, Cameroon's government has responded to the US accusations. Have a listen to what they had to say earlier.
I am really surprised by the statement of the US ambassador. We are victim. The nation as a whole is victim of a handful of people who have decided to take the law into their own hand, to resort to violence, to kill, to slaughter and behead soldiers, to burn to ashes institutions, to do this and that. The ambassador knows it very well.
We'll head to Madagascar next, where the illegal cutting down of trees is weighing heavily on the island's ecosystem. The Malaki and Manabi regions are where the largest mangroves can be found. They provide not only an essential habitat for wildlife, but also a main source of income for inhabitants.
In Mami's family, once a crab fisherman, always a crab fisherman. Earning nearly €80 a month, twice the minimum wage in Madagascar, Mami has had little reason to complain about his work, until now, as a decreasing supply of crabs is threatening his livelihood.
Before, there were lots of crabs here, but now there are fewer. I think it's because of climate change. In the past, the sea was very far, but today it's coming closer and closer.
Climate change may have had an impact, but so has deforestation. For the past 5 years, Mami has been illegally cutting down mangrove trees, a habitat for crabs and fish for the wood, which is also used for construction of huts or as firewood.
During high season, it's easy to catch crabs, but during low season, it's very difficult. So you have to find another source of income. Outside the village, there are people buying mangrove wood to build houses. At the time, I used to chop the wood to sell to those people.
Here, the mangrove trees have been totally decimated. The environmental consequences of this deforestation are grave.
It speeds up the erosion of the whole area because there's no more mangrove trees. It also speeds up the rising level of seawater inland because there's no barrier, since mangroves act as a barrier against erosion and strong winds like cyclones.
Mami has now stopped illegally tree cutting. Along with other villagers, he joined a reforestation program which has replanted 340 hectares of mangrove trees in the region in the last 6 years alone.
And finally, after the arrival of the Portuguese in the 15th century, the island nation of Cape Verde became central to the transatlantic slave trade. Cape Verde's oldest city, Cidade Velha, is where the boats arrived from Europe to buy slaves on their way to the Americas. Sarah Sacco reports with Emmanuel Londe.
Pirate attacks have long since stopped, but the royal fortress in Cidade Velha still looms protectively over the first European colonial town built in the tropics at the end of the 15th century. Soon after the Americas were discovered, the city quickly became an important post of the transatlantic slave trade off the coast of Africa.
Le pilori était placé au centre du marché.
The pillar was at the center of the market, and this market was the slave market. That's where they were tied and beaten, and next to it is the place that the hangings took place. This is what proves that Cape Verde really was one of the first centers of the Atlantic slave trade. It is estimated that nearly 4 million people passed through Cape Verde.
The imposed mixing of peoples and cultures gave birth to the first Creole society in the world. Art, social customs, traditional medicine, and of course new music surfaced before spreading across the Atlantic. Batuka is the oldest rhythm of the archipelago, created by slaves who were deprived of any instruments, forbidden in the colonial era. Today it's a symbol of Cape Verdean identity.
They started playing batuque as a music of resistance, revolt. As they did not have any instruments, they started playing like this, playing rhythmically with their hands like that. We feel very close to them because there are origins or history. These slaves who were looking for ways to revolt, this rhythm and this batuque, it's everything to us.
An iconic landmark of slave history, Cidade Velha, a UNESCO World Heritage Site, is today one of the country's most important tourist sites.
You're up to date with all the news from the continent. Up next, more international headlines. Stay tuned. You're watching France 24.
Declared an autonomous state of Somalia in 1998, Puntland sits at the crossroads of major maritime routes. Pirates often raided ships carrying valuable cargo and held their crews for ransom. The European Union's armed forces have nearly put an end to these attacks. But the threat remains, as various jihadi factions ratchet up the violence, endangering Puntland's fragile stability.
Join me for Puntland Revisited all this week on France 24 and France24.com.